Hello guys, Crypto Sunday, and it's been a bit of a red week, mainly for altcoins, I believe, but well, across the board really. Bitcoin not been doing so well. Looking at my pie chart, it is looking very much different at the moment because I sold a bit of Bitcoin before and have sort of sold some and some Ethereum to rebuy in the ETFs. So yeah, Solana sort of still needs to be adjusted at some point once I sort of crystallise that loss. But another interesting week with a fair amount of sort of turmoil. Crypto Twitter isn't particularly happy. The CoinShares report for the week before last was quite a bit negative, 1.17 billion in total outflows, sort of fairly well, not really across the board, Bitcoin and Ethereum basically. 930 million out of Ethereum, Bitcoin, sorry, and 438 out of Ethereum. But inflows into the multi-asset fund and Solana, sort of not really unexpected because they have their new ETF, and more into XRP, I suppose, because they have some ETFs. This doesn't include the new US ETF for XRP, so that will presumably come in tomorrow's report. And yeah, small amount into Litecoin, a little bit out of Sui, and a little bit 11.8 million into short Bitcoin. Considering they only have 118 in total, that's quite the addition. And then this another 29 million. We sort of saw a big inflow last week as well. So quite a lot going into other coins, which is a little bit unusual. And then sort of continued, you're getting this every week, 40 million into Germany, 50 into Switzerland, outflows pretty much everywhere else, 12 million into Brazil is quite a reasonable number, a little bit out of Hong Kong, but it's this Europe ETFs, which I presume are part of the Solana now and probably the XRP until the US one gets going, but yeah, pretty much the same by country every week. Looking at this week, it's going to be another negative on Bitcoin, quite significantly, really. We had sort of a almost dead day on Monday. Tuesday was reasonably positive, 524 million, and then some reasonable red days. So 278. Thursday was quite rough. Outflows out of BlackRock and Fidelity, but 318 million out of the new grayscale. So it only had 1.6 billion in inflows in total. So that's not quite a fifth, but close to a fifth of their total inflows out in one day. And 64 million out of the old grayscale as well is just continued outflow. And then, yeah, Friday it was BlackRock 463 million out of there, and yeah, 492 in total. So that's quite a negative week. Similarly on Ethereum, Monday was a complete zero for all of them, which don't really see all that much of at the moment. Don't think it was bank holiday or anything. It would have been zero on Bitcoin, I presume. So it was just a very, very quiet day. Or I suppose could have been a lot of volume, but net zero on all of them. That seems very unlikely. And then Monday was a little bit of outflow. Tuesday was a little bit of outflow. Wednesday a little bit more, and then Thursday, similar to Bitcoin, 260 million outflow, and then sort of Friday a little bit out from BlackRock and sort of quiet everywhere else. But continued outflows from the ETFs. I don't see this as the worst thing in the world. They've obviously put an enormous amount in. The BlackRock Bitcoin ETF is now sort of one of their larger ETFs, one of their largest revenue generating ETFs as well. So, it's come a long way. People are allowed to sort of take a little bit of profit if they sort of put 50 billion into it or something. 500 million of outflows is, you'd probably say, quite healthy. And the Solana ETFs, I would say, relatively impressive. They're only sort of still small numbers, and these are only people that have been in, for 3 weeks, I suppose. So to have bought, there could have been people that bought or seeded it, originally that maybe sort of are unhappy and want to take their money out. I wouldn't have been surprised to see maybe on this bad Thursday when everyone was selling Bitcoin and Ethereum. They still got 1.5 million into the Bitwise Sol. I mean, this could have been people, selling. I can't imagine it was just a quiet day. There might have been people who sold and it's just more buyers and it ends up a net inflow. But yeah, to not see a red day yet, I would see as quite impressive. The Grayscale Sol sort of is really struggling. I thought that might have done quite well, as I say. High fee. I can't imagine that helps it. Bitwise sort of being a very crypto-focused company with a much cheaper fee. Everything is just going to go there, you would expect. So, yeah, good for them. Quick look over a couple of helium reports. I hate to sort of rag on Cardano. I do seem to every time this comes out because I don't hold it, but it's a fairly big token, and I do just think it's worth highlighting. Some of these numbers, considering it's a $30 billion market cap at the end of Q3. I don't think it is now, but I haven't checked sort of what the market cap is. Maybe it's 20 billion or something if it's had a reasonable drop. But $20 billion is $20 billion, and quarterly revenue. I'm assuming this would be the same as total transaction fees on Solana, and sort of they're looking at $840,000 in transaction fees, down a bit from previous Q1 and Q4. But Solana has $122 million in quarterly revenue. Similarly, sort of on active addresses, 26,000 active addresses. Solana has 2.8 million people paying a fee every day, and sort of, so this could include people sort of logging in, checking their balance, and logging out again. I think sort of Solana's at like 4.5 million just users. So yeah, sort of over 100 times the number of users for sort of what is, I think, three times the market cap. Similarly on daily transactions, you're sort of talking over 100 times, maybe 300 times the number of transactions, and yeah, just everything just seems crackers to me for with Cardano still being that market cap, and you sort of still have the die-hard, fans, and Charles Hoskinson sort of saying every now and then when he sort of gets attacked, he sort of comes out singing its praises and starts saying it's going to be bigger than Bitcoin, it's going to be the biggest chain in the world, and you sort of think, right, why? Why exactly? But yeah, so yeah, hate to sort of criticise another chain, but I do think this does deserve a little bit of criticism, similar to XRP sometimes, sort of just being a very, very big coin, still with a huge following. That I always say people look at the some of these metrics when they were going up, and it's like a small amount goes up 30%, and they'll say, look, it's up 30%, and it's like, yeah, but other chains are doing 100 times that. Like they've got sort of $30 million in stable coin volume or something, and other chains have got like 10,000 times that. But yeah, it's a little bit silly. Looking at helium though, helium is looking pretty strong. There's obviously not a huge amount you can compare this to, as to sort of other chains. You can compare Cardano to Solana and Ethereum and that sort of thing. Helium is just kind of, is it doing well on its own? And they're doing quite well. Mobile hotspots is up 6.6%, not too bad. It sort of had been growing a lot quicker. Internet of Things hotspots up 9.5%. Mobile subscribers is obviously up quite heavily, but they do have the free tier now, so that's not too surprising. But 461,000 mobile subscribers is pretty strong, and mobile carrier offload data up 100%. So sort of this continued up over 100%, 4 quarters in a row. I think that is very strong. Total mobile paid traffic 8.5 thousand terabytes, and yeah, everything looking pretty good for Helium, except the price, of course. $2.44, a long way down from $7.55 in this quarter last year. So hopefully we can see things pick up at some point. Not the only coin that is down, of course. We've got an awful lot of fear in the market. The coin market cap fear and greed index is at 16, which you can sort of see is if we come on to the 1 year, we're pretty much at the lows of Liberation Day, which was a little bit rough for stocks, and of course the Bitcoin price got to $76,000. So we've reached the same level of fear with Bitcoin at $94,000. So that's pretty strong. It's sort of $20,000 higher, and about the same level in early to mid-March as well. And again, you sort of zoom out to previous times that we've been reasonably low on this metric, sort of mid 2024. This was you had the August sort of Japanese carry trade flush, and the sort of September, can't even remember what was going on, September to cause that drop. But Bitcoin was $54,000 then, so another 20,000 lower than Liberation Day. And we sort of had this summer malaise, really. It was just meandering around after the sort of March peak in 2024, after the sort of ETF bonanza, I suppose you'd call it. So yeah, you can see sort of on the all-time, we haven't been here for, well, aside from those two bits earlier this year. We never actually got that low, at all. This one only goes back to sort of early to mid 2023, or end of June 2023. The alternative one that is out there does go back quite a long way, but sort of just looks a little bit of an awful chart, really. I think that one was at 10 though, so that is pretty low. Yeah, you can obviously see when fear gets to these sort of levels, it often, not every time, but often sort of indicates that we're at or near the lows of sort of the next few months and previous few months. Sort of Liberation Day lows obviously was this spike down, down to 74,000. The May one, the sort of March one this year, admittedly wasn't the low. It sort of drifted up a little bit, and then you had Liberation Day low. But I mean, previous ones, this September low period was basically the low point, and it then sort of doubled within 3 months, admittedly with the Trump election. But you sort of had some low points here in July when it wasn't sort of the absolute low necessarily. But yeah, we are sort of below those levels, and I guess you could be optimistic that everyone else is so fearful if you're sort of patient and not time limited. So unsurprisingly, when you get sort of fear down at these levels, everyone on crypto Twitter starts sort of trying to find any reason that they can that Bitcoin price is so low. Sort of $94,000 is not really that low. It's 25%, I think, down from the highs. We sort of do remember old times where you would get 30+% corrections sort of quite regularly. multiple times in a bull run cycle. A lot of people still posting the 2017 cycle where you got five 30% drops just in sort of 1 year, really. And that's sort of, a lot of people are criticizing that and calling that sort of copium and saying that we shouldn't be like that anymore. But to say you're never sort of going to correct even 25% again seems a little bit too optimistic, really. It's still a relatively new asset and a relatively speculative asset with 100x leverage available, 150x leverage. So you're always going to get that, I think. But one of the reasons people put to this was strategy, selling. So there was a tweet from, I'm not even going to sort of give them the credit of who it was, but they suddenly came out and said MicroStrategy have sold 40,000 Bitcoin and are selling every hour, selling more and more Bitcoin. I think this is just getting to this this idea that every single Bitcoin move by sort of a large holder is a sale. They could never move it just for some other reason, moving it sort of to be with a different custodian or all manner of things. So people sort of they've spent an awful lot of time trying to track down the strategy wallets, and it seems that some people have found them. I expect, much to Mr. Saylor's annoyance, probably doesn't want them tracked. And so every time that they move, if they move 40,000 or something, maybe it's to another custodian or just sort of for diversification of wallets, whatever reason, people immediately tweet strategy are selling, which is kind of annoying because it does cause an awful lot of people to panic and maybe some sort of newer people to sell out of fear, because obviously if strategy were forced to start selling a large proportion or all of their 600,000 Bitcoin, that would be an enormous hit on price. People talk about the Satoshi wallet. If that sort of ever gets moved or sold, that's 1 million Bitcoin, and that would completely crash price. And the strategy hoard is 60% of that now. So if they do come to start selling at some point, then that would be a big hit. But Michael Saylor sort of came out relatively quickly and said there's no truth to this rumor. They are still aggressively ramping up their purchases of Bitcoin. Not sure sort of quite how they're doing it, because the price is now below $200, and I think they're at sort of pretty low 1.2x mNAV if you include all of the sort of preferred shares and everything. On a sort of market cap basis, they're worth less than, on a purely MSTR market cap, they're worth less than their current hoard of Bitcoin. So people sort of getting a little bit panicked, and as I say, they will sort of put any reason they can, clutching at straws, trying to find a reason that Bitcoin is down, because they're maybe not as patient or newer to the market, I suppose. So kind of in that vein, I want to talk about this chart because I'm not very happy with it, and sort of seeing it going around everywhere. Willy Woo has sort of had some comments on this as well. The sort of OG whale dumping being sort of, people are saying, the main reason at the moment that we're not going up in price. I think there is, there's obviously some truth to OGs. These are sort of classed as people that have held for 7 years or more, which, I would actually be, I'm not a whale, but I would be counted as OG, it seems, having not sold for over 7 years. I don't know whether that counts as sort of not made a transaction at all for over 7 years, or whether it's just, the Bitcoin that is there having not moved for 7 years. Obviously, I sold some Bitcoin in the last few months, but what is still there in the wallet has been there since 2013. So yeah, I presume that what is still there is still counted as OG Bitcoin. And, I just sort of gave you the example. In the last um, month, I have sold like £50,000 worth of Bitcoin and Ethereum and rebought in the ETFs. So you would assume after sort of a couple of days, once that gets netted out in the ETFs, there's a little bit of sell pressure for me on the exchanges, and then a little bit of buy pressure in the ETFs, and they would go and rebuy that Bitcoin and Ethereum. So that would be a zero. But according to this chart, if I were, a whale, let's say this was not whale dumping, it was just OG's dumping in general, I would have counted as having dumped when actually I haven't. I've just rebought in the ETFs. So I would say you possibly got Willy Woo has come out with this a sort of similar vein. You could have people moving from early addresses to a taproot address or a sort of new SegWit resistant, quantum resistant address. Literally just moving their entire stack from one wallet to a new wallet. That might be sort of $5 billion, $10 billion worth of Bitcoin, and everyone will obviously then say, well, OG's dumping, there you go, sold, when it's not sold, they've just moved it. Custody rotation, some people are, potentially moving it to Coinbase or something if they're a large holder. They may be moving it to a bank if their, bank didn't offer it years ago, now they do. You don't want to be some people don't want to be holding $10 billion worth of Bitcoin on a ledger or something that you keep at home, maybe with backups, but you would just trust your bank. If JP Morgan or someone offer it, then you may sort of think they're the biggest bank in the world, I'll let them hold it. And it sort of safeguards against the famed $5 wrench attack. Someone comes around your house and sort of forces you to send it to them, basically. That's a lot more difficult if it's at the bank. You also have treasury companies, so you've had sort of various people, even in the sort of public space, Adam Back and people like that, sending their Bitcoin to a treasury company. And then, in theory, I would see this as a weaker, a weaker reason, because they could then be selling shares of the treasury company. It sort of gives them liquidity without having the sort of stigma necessarily of selling. You could be sort of dumping the shares on retail who sort of see treasury companies as a leveraged bet on Bitcoin, which hasn't gone too well. But in theory, some of these treasury companies, the people putting the Bitcoin in, are not allowed to sell the shares for a year, let's say. So far, that would count as a sale because the Bitcoin has moved, or on this chart that would count as OG dumping, when in fact it's gone into a treasury company and that person hasn't sold the shares of the treasury company. So again, that is not necessarily selling. The other thing I would point out to is that this chart is in dollar value, which is even worse. So sort of 500, this is the yellow lines are coins over 7 years old, over $100 million of moves. So you've got the sort of 2021 cycle back here. There was a little, a little bit of selling at sort of 50,000, a little bit at $30,000, and $100 million when Bitcoin's 30,000 is a lot different to when it's 120,000. And the red bars here is over $500 million worth of Bitcoin, 500 million of Bitcoin. So again, you haven't got a lot of bars in the 2021 period, and 2018 you have no red bars at all and just one sort of lowly yellow bar. But again, Bitcoin was 20,000 at the peak here, and it wasn't at 20,000 for very long. Some of this, if it was being sold, could have been sold at sort of 17,000, I would have thought, maybe $16,000, and again, prices 6 times, 7 times that value. So this should really be, I would say, valued in Bitcoin rather than valued in dollars. To sort of say there's more selling here is a little bit disingenuous, and that is kind of proved by Glassnode. I think this one. Oh no, actually, this one was the previous day. Not sure why this sort of hasn't been highlighted quite so much. This is over 7 year old coins where over 1,000 Bitcoin per hour has been spent. So this is sort of ignoring the actual price. This is just how much Bitcoin is being moved, and you can see OGs were selling, or moving Bitcoin. Again, they might have even been moving Bitcoin for other reasons back then, but they were moving over 1,000 Bitcoin an hour quite a lot back in the 2017 cycle, all the way up to the peak, even early in the peak, and then 2021 cycle. Bitcoin was sort of 30, $25,000-$30,000. They were selling, in theory, quite a lot there, and all the way sort of up into the peak, and then quite a lot all the way through 2022, 23, 24, and sort of current year. So, again, going back to Willy Woo's argument, a lot of this would potentially indicate that it isn't selling. Sort of whales, you don't often see that many whales sort of selling the bottom and selling sort of quiet periods. I think this would potentially indicate that some of this is moving coins and things, and then an awful lot in the past 2 years, not necessarily at the highs. So I think this chart sort of gives you a little bit of a better indication. Whales are. I mean, it was even reported back in 2021 that whales were incredibly active, and they pointed out that whales were very active in the 2017 cycle. They get called the smart money because they're sort of distributing, selling, assumed that they're selling sort of into the top, basically. They don't sell particularly early. So why all of a sudden we've changed it to a dollar value and basically trying to pretend that they never sold all the way up in the 2017 cycle, and that now they are, seems a little bit, I don't know, beginner sort of amateur reporting. So yeah, I'm not very happy with this sort of reporting at all. I think, yeah, just to sort of cover as well, Willy Woo sort of pointed out the type of addresses. You can see, I think this, these brown section here is sort of the very old addresses, and that sort of went down quite a lot in 2021. And he sort of pointed out the light blue addresses are sort of quantum resistant addresses, or a little bit more so at least than the old ones, and that's sort of been expanding quite heavily in 2023, 24, and 25. And the sort of purple section here is sort of presumably the newest form, because that only started in 22, has expanded quite a bit. So it just shows that sort of OG coins, maybe this could be sort of just new entrants coming in and creating these new wallets, but I would say the older the older colors reducing are potentially OGs just moving them to new addresses. But yeah, I think there's certainly discussion to be had rather than just saying OGs are selling because look at all these bars. So yeah, rant over, but I think it needed to be said. Looking at coins for the week, everything's down, obviously. Bitcoin is down 5.6%, Solana down 10.4%, Ethereum down 5.5%, Chainlink down 5.8%, Helium, admittedly, we just said they're doing quite well, they're only down 1.4%, Radium 3.7%. Metaplex, I think after having a bad week last week, are down 40%. Might have to sort of have a bit more of a dig into why this is happening. I've not seen any sort of major news. Gito down 22%. Some of the Solana stuff not doing well at all. And Honey is down 8%, which I should update here because it is now under £300. I suppose I should really just consider these pretty much dead. It might be worth actually, if these sort of get towards April, end of the tax year, maybe just taking the loss on these and not even sort of buying other crypto, just putting that money into stocks or something and taking sort of, what is this, 8, 9, 10,000 loss nearly. But we'll see. Maybe we still have a bit of an alt run to come, sort of over the next year. So, yeah, interesting week and an interesting rant, I thought. So leave your thoughts in the comments below and like and subscribe. See you soon.